What are some of the symptoms that people can feel if they do have a parasite problem? And what are the next steps besides just the testing?
Parasites are nocturnal. Their replication and reproductive cycles often mirror, the new moon or full moon. And so people will have insomnia or feel more amped up around the full moons. It's a stress on the body. They're nocturnal when they're moving around. So people often clench or grind their teeth at night. It's called bruxism. And this can be a sign of sleep apnea. It can be a sign of stress. It can be a sign of parasites too. So don't forget that one. Usually the inflammation kicked up by parasites can cause people to have a lactose intolerance or dairy sensitivity. They'll often have muscle twitches and fasciculations, intermittent rectal itching. That's a good one. Digestive issues, bloating, acid reflux. They might have a ton of food sensitivities or have whittled themselves down to an extremely restrictive diet because of said food sensitivities or reactions. And they always have leaky gut.
Dr. Jess, thank you for joining us today on the Extend podcast. Really excited to learn from you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Darshan. I think it's my honor to be here, of course.
Right. So Dr. Jess is an incredible deep functional medicine expert. And, I just had a podcast released today of myself on the Ultimate Human podcast, with Dr. Gary Brecka. We drove into toxins and mold and all of these symptoms that people have when they're struggling with their health and they just can't find anyone to listen. They just can't find anyone to say, there's something else going on here that typical Western medicine doesn't test for or normally ignores for years, that deteriorate the quality of your life. And it's so fantastic that there are doctors like you out there that are bringing more attention to these symptoms, to these struggles that people are happening. And not only are you bringing attention, you are also providing them with protocols to treat them. And so I'm just so excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, same. And likewise, sir. I mean, thank you for your contribution as well of doing the same.
Yeah. And so I would love to just launch in just real quick, Dr. Jess, like you're a doctor. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to functional medicine and treating these symptoms?
Sure. So, I am a traditionally trained medical doctor. I went to school at the University of Louisville in Kentucky for internal medicine and really did residency, finished, worked in a hospital for almost 7 years as a hospitalist. And really drank the Kool-Aid, believed everything they taught me, got my flu shot every year, was a good little doctor, did all the protocols that they recommended. And, it took me years till I saw cracks in the system. And at first I thought, gosh, I wonder if anyone else sees that discharging patients on 40 medications isn't real health. Or does anyone else see that they're giving, factory farmed meat and processed dairy and there's Coca-Cola and Pepsi in the hospitals? Like things weren't adding up for me at that point. It just something clicked in my head and I just started to see it. And I thought maybe these other doctors don't see it. I'm sure they'd love to know this information, right? They'd love to know this. But that wasn't my experience, sadly. When I went and I started to kind of be a little bit more disruptive, people told me to shut my mouth. And in fact, I was a little rowdy. I'll admit, I wrote in the electronic medical record, this patient who is being admitted to my service has been on Prevacid, which is a proton pump inhibitor for acid reflux for almost a decade. And the package insert clearly says 6 months to 1 year. And why has no one talked to this patient about their diet or food sensitivities or anything like that? And so, when I wrote that in the chart, the primary care doctor called the lead hospitals to complain about me. And they said that I was a liability. And in my perspective at that time, I felt like they were the liability for this patient. And so they set me down and they said, this isn't the first talking to I've had before. They set me down and they said, if you don't stop writing this in the chart, you can't work for us anymore. And I was in a position in my life where I wasn't married, I didn't have children. So I just said, okay, I quit. And I bounced. And it was kind of a rude awakening for me. I don't know about you, but for me, I realized very, very rapidly that there isn't a ready-made built-in system for doctors that don't go through medical school. In medical school, we're a little coddled.
Right.
Where you graduate, I started working at a hospital. My malpractice insurance was taken care of, my 403B, like paychecks. I didn't have to worry about anything, right? All that was
Uh-huh.
done. But when I left the system, I had to become a businesswoman and an
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur. And I had to really start knowing about tax structure and S corps and LLCs and all these things they don't teach you in medical school at
Right.
all. And so I made about a fourth of what I used to make.
Yeah.
Um, so it was
I
a
took a big
struggle.
pay cut myself, Dr. Jess, when I went into this field,
Yeah.
massive pay cut. But I just said, I just have to practice this kind of medicine because people need it, right? And
Bravo.
so it takes people like yourself, Dr. Jess, to have the courage to go out there and bringing this information to people.
I think that struggle that we went through is part of the journey for a lot of doctors. We don't have it hard when we graduate school most of the time. And so to really learn what you're made of, that you can use your brain for other things besides medicine and learn how to be a business person and entrepreneur just like you have and I have is part of the journey. It's part of the
Yeah.
struggle. It's part
And I
of
think
realizing who you
it's
are.
right. And it's so important for people to realize, like, look, like a lot of people say, oh, they're just trying to sell us snake oil, is like what people say a lot. And it's like, I don't need to sell you snake oil. I can make 10x more money just being in the regular medical system, doing surgery every single day on people that, more and more people need surgery. It's like an
Yep.
endless stream of surgeries that I could have done on people. And this was a massive pay cut. This was a massive,
Oh yeah.
um, you know, earthquake in my life to quit traditional Western medicine and not take insurance anymore. I don't think people realize like the reason
Yes.
their insurance is so expensive is because those dollars are being spent in a ridiculously irresponsible way without even getting to the cause of what the problem is. It's like
Mm,
taking your car to a garage to get fixed and they just break more things and they don't even look at the cause and just keep fixing things on you forever, right? And so it's
yeah.
like you never get your car truly fixed. Like the minute you drive it off and drive for another couple of weeks, something else breaks and something else breaks, right? And it's
It's
like
so
it's
true. I'm
yeah,
so glad. I resonate so much with what you're saying. I mean, if people only knew, there's never been one published study or study that I know of on a person on more than 5 pharmaceutical medications at once. And so we don't even really know how much of these people's side effects and consequences are coming from things like prescription meds and, other drugs and,
yeah,
and
Prevacid,
procedures.
especially 10 years of
I
Prevacid.
mean, give me
I
a
mean,
break.
that's yeah, exactly. And like, I think these drug companies, they want people to be on their meds, obviously, forever. And they have zero instructions or education on when someone gets taken off the medication, right? We just assume it's forever. And that's terrible.
It's terrible. And,
Right.
the system has really, it doesn't look at the body as a whole. It separates us all into these specialties, right? So this doctor, we both know well the chart wars where, cardiologists and a nephrologist, heart and a kidney doctor arguing the chart about which organ system is more important. And really the body doesn't work that way. It works as a whole. And so when you discombobulate the system and you separate it into different divisions, we're too busy. We're too busy to call other doctors and collaborate half the time. We're too busy to really look in depth and brainstorm about these people. We spend like 8 minutes sometimes with people. I mean, I can't even find out where someone lives half the time in 8 minutes. So it's just really, the system is really set up for us to fail and not to get to the root cause for people. And it's a procedure based system. So the hospital pays for surgeries, right? It doesn't pay to talk to people or educate them. It does not.
Right. Right,
So,
exactly. I mean, and all the money is in doing more diagnostics because you get paid for diagnostics, you get paid for procedures. Pharmaceutical companies and pharmacies get paid for people being on drugs. And
mm,
so it's definitely, there's no incentive to get people off of drugs, out of the hospital, and canceling their surgeries right now. And I always say, like, look, I'm not trying to be negative on the Western medical system. Thank God it's
no.
there.
Yes.
You get hit by a bus, you get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, have a heart attack, God forbid.
Mhm.
Thank God we have emergency rooms and hospitals to take care of us. But it was
Yes.
never built for chronic disease reversal. It was never built for multi-system disease processes. It
Mm.
was never built for some of the things that we're going to talk about today that are indolent infections and toxic exposure. It was never built for that. And so we need to build another system.
I think you're my new best friend. That's what I think. I mean, really, I could have said the same thing. Amen to that, because there's no more truth than that, guys. Like, that is the truth right there. It's built for emergencies, but it's not built for your longevity.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's continue with your story, Dr. Jess. Sorry, I always get on my soapbox on this. And
No, I love it.
so you went out there, you started a practice, you were struggling, you had to become an entrepreneur, and then you had
Mhm.
kind of a shakeup in your life.
I did. I had real big shakeup in my life. It's been a wild ride. So, at that time I was shadowing a naturopath. This was in Monterey Park in East LA, as well as working at Whitaker Wellness when it was still open, and learning and training with all those guys too. And that it was in Newport Beach. So I spent a lot of my time driving back and forth with making very little money. I went to the Gerson Institute. I learned about coffee enemas and juicing and things like that for cancer, one perspective. That really taught a lot about environmental toxins, sort of ripped the blinders off of my eyes, if you will. And then I went to Institute of Functional Medicine. I got trained in ozone therapy, and a lot of other things along the way that have added to my education. Then I ended up starting a supplement company. And, you know, in the end, shareholders came and took it from me and sued me for 3.5 years for that. So that was one shakeup of my life. The next
Hmm.
one that happened was I was in California working, and I had just moved there in 2016, right when they passed SB 277 and SB 276 shortly thereafter. And I worked at a naturopathic clinic. I was the only medical doctor there because I just aligned with how they saw the body and their perspective. And let me just say here, chiropractors and naturopaths have been some of my greatest teachers. So thank you if you're out there listening. You've been there. I'm a medical doctor who's thanking you at this point in time. So it's been very integral to my learning. So I was working at that clinic, Nurse Medical Center, which is wonderful in San Diego. And I was tag teaming with a pediatric naturopath, Dr. Ilana Rumel, and she was seeing the patients and children and then writing the note. I was also writing a note, signing off on it, and giving a vaccine exemption if I saw fit for any sort of fragile child. Because in California, under SB 277, 276, they made it mandatory to receive all 72 doses of vaccines before the age of 18 to attend public school. And truly in my belief system, truly, I believe that people have so many genetic and epigenetic expressions today that if we're really truly practicing medicine, we have to look at everyone as bio-individual, and their traumas and toxin bucket and all that stuff adds to what is methylated on their genes or what is epigenetically turned on or off, just like keys on a piano that are pressed. And so if we don't look at that and we're just giving someone blanket medicine, that's bad medicine. And I feel like we saw that in these past few years with COVID. We saw how the vaccine really hurt and damage some people and caused myocarditis. It's coming out in the studies, plus more. And some people handled it. You know what? Some children are like that.
Hmm.
And, all children are like that. We're all different. And can you imagine how that might be different in a developing immune system? Because in vaccines, they are targeting the immune system. We are trying to target and increase immunity against a certain antigen. And so if we tag the immune system too much, AKA 72 doses of vaccines, according to the CDC, there are some children whose bodies cannot handle that. And they cannot detox the adjuvants that are in vaccines like polysorbate 80, gentamicin, rhesus monkey cells, certain other things, right? Aluminum sometimes if we're
Hmm.
considering Gardasil. And so, the California didn't take that lightly. So when they passed SB 276, they actually had the Health and Human Services Department start subpoenaing patients' medical records without their permission to open them up to check the integrity of the vaccine exemption. And no one told you who they were. You just thought it was maybe for a divorce case or something between the parents, right? So when that happened, they then opened an investigation on hundreds of doctors and
Hmm.
retroactively punished us by not. Sometimes I didn't sign a chart in time, or didn't have the exact physical exam they wanted. They got us on minutia a lot, and then they came after me. I had the same fate as like Bob Sears and
Hmm.
Dr. Bob Sears, Dr. Kelly Sutton, Dr. Z in San Diego, who wrote the most vaccine exemptions in San Diego County at the time. And they got us all on everything. So when they came to me, I said, I could take their punishment and it was 3 years probation. You had to pay yourself and the medical board's legal fees in a law they had just passed. And you had to do about 60 hours of their re-education, and then a stipulated license with no exemptions. And then all the other exemptions that I did for fragile children were null and void, which was the real goal.
Mm. Mm.
So instead of doing that, I decided I don't make money seeing patients. That's not how I'm making money anymore. I did it because I liked to see patients.
Yeah.
And so I decided to surrender my medical
Mm.
license willingly. Now, the Board of California actually put on the site disciplinary surrender, which means I surrendered
Mm.
under discipline, not that I was made to.
Mm.
But that was very tricky wording on their part. But, I felt like that was the bigger play. I really
Mm.
wanted to media blitz them. I really wanted the public to know what was going on because this happened before COVID. And I could see that they were coming for the adults next, So
Yeah.
I wish that more people had been brave enough to interview me during that time,
Yeah.
but most people were not.
Right. Right. Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry you went through all of that. Unfortunately for you, it's a completely different world out there now with the scrutiny placed on vaccines. And I
Mhm.
had a pediatrician come on the podcast a couple months ago talking about vaccines and how our the way we prescribe vaccines and the rules around vaccines are based on incredibly old science. And in
Yes.
2025, there's a lot of these diseases we're vaccinating for that, number one, the vaccines cause more harm than protection. Number two, those diseases are not even relevant anymore in 2025 when we can diagnose and treat them very effectively. On the rare time someone gets something, we need to do a complete reevaluation, a rescrub on vaccines, and like you said, make it an N of one decision every time on who gets what when. And
Yes.
I'm very nuanced about vaccines myself. I think that there are some vaccines that protect the public
Yeah.
from diseases that spread very easily, like measles. And then there's other vaccines that are just designed to protect the individual. And then you really have the ability to decide N of one, like, is this a protection that's needed? Is it a dose of a vaccine that is going to cause more harm than good at this time in life? I mean, there's so much that we have to
Mm.
sort through. And you were doing that sorting and then you got punished for it.
And so was Dr. I think it's Dr. Ken Stoller, who was in San Francisco, who's vaccine injured himself and was genetically testing children. Look at Dr. Paul Thomas, who really conducted the first head-to-head study in his practice of, tens of thousands of children who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And,
Mhm.
he was told there were too many confounding factors in the study, that it was not relevant. And then they took his license. Tried
Mm.
to. They punished him, right? So it's like there's a lack of comprehensive review on vaccines. There's never been a head-to-head study on vaccinated versus unvaccinated children
Right.
because they say it's unethical. I mean, I know plenty of mothers who would probably volunteer their children for that, to be honest. But there's lots of things that I don't agree with. Like, they'll actually approve a vaccine by taking an older vaccine that's been approved and do this
Mm.
backwards approval process. So I just think a lot of it needs to be, like you said, rigorously studied and redone.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, everything, throw the baby out with the bathwater, but where is the science that should be eternally questioned rather than just safe and effective rhetoric that is, parroted to us regularly, especially during COVID?
Yeah, it's so true. And look, like, I think all of medicine needs to have a reevaluation at this moment in time. I think the same is true of prescription medications. We put people on medications that cause more harm than good in some patients. It doesn't, the effect that it's supposed to have doesn't have the effect. And there's so much we need to rethink here. And I think it's really up to the individual to ask the questions, to ask about what should I be following in my testing to see if this is really helping or not, and really understand their own individual biology. And I'm hopeful that we're at a moment in time that we can have this revaluation. And just like Western medicine, we said, like you said, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. There are some vaccines that are needed, that have good science, that are probably beneficial for a majority of people. But if you're not in that majority, what do you do, right? And I think that's where you kind of were saying, like, let's evaluate and let's see if this is right for you.
Yeah, let's dig in rather than get
Yeah.
mad and say, no, they're fine. If they're fine, let's do the research. Why not?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm so happy to hear that you're back in practice here in Florida,
Yeah.
and we are going to talk today about some of these more enigmatic functional medicine topics that I think are really important for people to hear about. And so, I would love to kind of dive in with you on
Mhm.
kind of the patient that comes to you now with a cluster of symptoms that no one can figure out, right? What do they, can you kind of walk us through, like, what does that journey look like for the average patient that comes to you? What are they coming to you
Mhm.
complaining about? And then what do you do next as a doctor?
Yes. I feel like we might have a similar population of
Yeah.
patients that we share, but in general, it's usually a female, ages 20 something to 50 something, and they have this constellation of symptoms that they've been given pretty much no hope for, and it'll be vague symptoms like brain fog, fatigue, joint pains, bloating, digestive issues, maybe severe feed fatigue where they're almost in bed all day, right? Um, they typically have a lot of different trauma that may have happened in their childhood that set them up kind of more opportunistic for these things, and continued trauma throughout adulthood, along with, there's always a combination of something emotional or big traumatic that happens, along with the physical exposure or reason for it. Call it the perfect storm. And they will have these symptoms for years with no one being able to figure out what it is, running autoimmune panels, regular blood work, being admitted sometimes, and giving all these labels or ICD-10 codes, which for me aren't root cause. It's just a label that determines what, usually medication or pharmaceutical, that you'll be classified as being given. So, for me, I like to start with people's nervous system because the autonomic nervous system controls everything from pupillary dilation to sexual responses to immunity function to metabolism and energy and fuel storage. So if it's off completely and you're in sympathetic overdrive or flight, fight, or freeze, as opposed to parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, then you're going to be constipated. You're going to be bloated. There's not a pill to fix all those problems, right? I can have things that biohack it and help a little bit, but we really have to change sometimes people's thinking, which is very difficult, and their hope in their body, because it's really hard to heal a body that you hate or that you don't feel safe in. And so I start there. Things like GABA sometimes can help. GABA with L-theanine, SAMe, depending on people's MTHFR status, and if they have a slow comp T, which is the worrier gene. So I like to kind of dig into that a little bit, depending on what type of B vitamin they need is dependent on their genes. Really giving them high dose minerals help ground the nervous system, because this helps the neurons fire properly. You need charges to build a potential for nerves to fire properly, which come from minerals. If you don't have that, then metals can replace them, right? So we start with the nervous system to kind of balance people out. And then I like to do what's called opening drainage,
Mm,
which means making sure that people can have bowel movement 2 to 3 times per day. I mean, normalize talking about poop, right? It's very important, because if you can't poop, my friends, then you're going to recirculate toxins and feel like you have the flu, and then we won't be friends anymore. So, I like to make sure you're sweating within 10 minutes in a sauna, that you can, tolerate things like caffeine and alcohol if you have a cup, or that you can fast, because that's the liver's job to break down glycogen into glucose to sustain your blood sugar, that your bile is moving and you're sleeping okay, you're feeling kind of rested in the morning. When all those things are opened up, I know you're ready for whatever we find on your test. And we always find something, as heavy metals, some sort of plastics or pesticides or phthalates, mold toxicity, sometimes parasites, right? People think you can't get those in America, but you can. Parasites don't care about borders, right? And then other things. So we usually find something or a multitude of things that are a plethora of things that are causing people's mysterious symptoms,
right. No,
right?
this is so great, Dr. Jess. So, I think for the listeners, men and women, but you're right. I think the majority are women, because women are more attuned with their bodies, I think, in their symptomatology. So they come see us more often about these. But if it's a plethora of just weird symptoms and your typical doctor's not giving you the answer, and don't get also kind of fooled by they saying to you, I checked your blood test and everything looks normal. Usually those
Mm,
blood tests are very superficial blood tests. In medicine, we use CBC and chem profiles, and they sometimes don't change until things are really, really bad. And
that's
so
right. That's
we have the
right.
technology now to directly test for these toxins, to test for immune responses, and we should be doing that. And so I think I like your kind of starting point, the nervous system, because these are all like quick, easy wins too for people to
Hmm.
start
I see
going
a
down
lot
the
of
path, right, on their own, right?
of course, and I see a lot of people with histamine issues, mast cell, I'm
Yeah,
sure you do too. That inflammation, that nervous system mold response that causes that hypervigilant histamine response, that has to be calmed down before you can move forward. They react to every protocol.
right.
So, I'm sure you see that.
We do, we
Yeah.
do. And so if someone comes in with these symptoms and you're checking for histamine response, toxins, parasites, mold, and also histamine response, right? Is there a panel that can give you all this information all together, or is it like symptoms combined with multiple panels? Well, what's kind of the diagnostic protocol there?
Yeah, for sure. So everyone that comes to my clinic, I do have them do a total tox test by Vibrant
Uh-huh.
Wellness.
Yep.
It doesn't cover everything you just said. Like I can't look for histamine response in
Right.
there, but it does cover heavy metals, mold or mycotoxins. And then I love their environmental panel because it does include Roundup Ready or glyphosate. It does include other organophosphate pesticides and plasticizers and phthalates and things like that. It even looks for BPA. So that's kind of a nice one for me to start with people. And it's a drop ship urine kit. So it's a little bit more convenient as well. I also have them just do a regular blood panel, but it is a CBC and CMP, which I tell people hasn't changed in the last 30 to 50 years. So
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt. But we also include inflammatory labs. I do a full thyroid panel, including antibodies. I do ESR, homocysteine, CRP, hemoglobin A1C, vitamin D, and full iron panel, full cholesterol panel. So, I'm able to see nuances in there if there's a need for B vitamins, if there's a lot of inflammation going on in the body, what the iron is doing, how well are they absorbing fat soluble vitamins. So, I can tell a lot from that combined with the total tox for people. Oftentimes, if there's hormone specific problems, I'll do something like a hormone zoomer or Dutch test.
Right.
If they have, histamine issues, that's more like kind of a diagnosis of exclusion for me, right?
Mhm.
They'll have, histamine in the brain is brain fog and histamine in the gut is bloating and loose stools and histamine in the skin is eczema and rashes and hives and eczema in the bladder is interstitial cystitis. And so I can kind of see this myriad of symptoms that doesn't look related. And if you can learn to pattern recognize, as you know we do, then you can pick up when, oh, this is a histamine problem for you. Now, why are you having that? The number one reason is nervous system dysregulation, and number two, mold or combo of both.
Right.
Right? Parasites can do it too in SIBO, but that's usually what I see it come from.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
for the, you had mentioned a little bit earlier that you're also checking the Dutch test for hormones, which I love as well. And I think, hormonal dysregulation for men and women can lead to many of these same symptoms, especially after, in your mid to late 30s. So it's really important to check for that too.
Yeah, don't I know? I had personal experience with that. I mean, I think I probably suffered for years
Mm,
with like waking up and just being tearful in the morning. And I'm now, for anyone listening, on bioidentical hormone therapy myself and went through that whole journey. It's really changed my life.
yeah.
So yeah, if you guys are listening and you feel that way, then you should really look into something because I suffered for years. So don't be like me. But the hormone zoomer, the Dutch test, it tells us so much. I can see instantly when I look at those tests as to why someone might have a breast cancer diagnosis,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And what about you had mentioned COMT, MTHFR. These are all genetic predispositions to lots of issues,
Yes.
and they can be very helpful to have these genes looked at and see if you do have an abnormality there. Is there a genetic test that you like or use?
Well, I'll tell you, I like the 10X that
Yeah.
Gary Braca has used with a lot of people. It's very simple for people to read. It's very easy for me to read too. I also like Genetics Protocol by Dr. Courtney Hunt. I think they both do a really great job. And I know Dr. Tyler Pansner, he also has a genetic test too that is very good. And that can really just help me look at few key genes that I know are going to affect their methylation, their detox, their ability to calm down and regulate their nervous system, as you know.
Yeah.
And that helps me kind of direct care, because I truly believe that you can't just do blanket green pharmacy with everyone.
Right, right, absolutely. And what's important about those genes, you're not just looking at one gene, you're looking at pathways. So MTHFR is very popular now because of Gary Brecka and others, that people are wanting to check for that gene, but it's really the whole pathway you need to be
Mhm.
checking for. And so I think people need to know that working with a doctor like yourself or and Next Health clinics, we can evaluate the whole pathway and still find where we can support your genetics or genetic abnormalities, without, and that'll really help form the basis of future treatment protocols as well.
Yes, it's a very good point, actually.
Yeah. Can I ask you about the parasites and the SIBO and the stool testing? Is there a stool test that you are using a lot of?
Yes, I really love Vibrance testing. I use their gut zoomer, but I will tell you, a lot of these tests, like the GI map, the gut zoomer, GI map is PCR, which we can see the limitations from the last few years with the PCR test. And then, the gut zoomer has a little bit more zoomed in technology that uses a array technology from Silicon Valley. So I like them, but again, they only test for a handful of parasites when there are thousands of types of
Yeah.
parasites. So I feel like it's missed a lot on the test. And so I found a MD PhD who runs a company called parasites.org,
Mm.
and they do the old, can you imagine the old school way of looking into the microscope with the naked eye and looking to see themselves, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so I will often combine that if the patient has the means. And that way you're able to kind of get a better look, right? And I find a lot on there. I mean, they look for eggs, larvae, things dividing, all of that. So it's a little more accurate.
That's awesome. I did not know that existed. That there are people still looking under a microscope. Wow, that's awesome.
Gasp. Yes, I know, right? I see. It's so old school,
I
it's
know.
perfect.
It's
And they
great.
also are using other technologies too, obviously, when they run the test, but that's something that I think is a missing art in parasitology.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start there. I think, parasites is something that we have not really explored in this podcast yet. And I'd love to just start there. What are some of the symptoms that people can feel if they do have a parasite problem? And what are the next steps besides just the testing? What was the name of that website, by the way?
Parasites.org.
Okay. And can a
Yeah.
person get the test themselves on that website, or do they need to go through a doctor?
They can actually. They can,
Fantastic.
yeah. So
Okay.
it's nice. It's a stool test. So they'll send it to your house and you just do it yourself, stool test. But okay, for parasites.
Yes.
So there's some questions that I ask everyone. And I like to start people with a parasite cleanse if I do any sort of detox first, because a lot of the animal studies have shown that parasites can hold 6 times the amount of heavy metals that you think a regular fish can hold.
Mm.
We've also seen mold spores. We've seen retroviruses interplay with the immune system, and things like strongyloides and the HTLV virus and things like that. So we know that there's an interplay of frenemies, if you will, within the toxin bucket. And so when people have parasites or overrun by them, I do think it's more of a terrain issue, right? They're full of toxins and trauma. The parasites are there digesting metals and things. So it's a stress on the body. Parasites are nocturnal. Their replication and reproductive cycles often mirror, the new moon or full moon. And so people will have insomnia or feel more amped up around the full moons. It's a stress on the body. They're nocturnal when they're moving around. So people often clench or grind their teeth at night. It's called bruxism. And this
Mhm.
can be a sign of sleep apnea. It can be a sign of stress. It can be a sign of parasites too. So don't forget that one. Usually, the inflammation kicked up by parasites can cause people to have a lactose intolerance or dairy sensitivity.
Mm.
They'll often have muscle twitches and fasciculations,
Mm.
intermittent rectal itching. That's a good one.
Mm.
Digestive issues, bloating, acid reflux. They might have a ton of food sensitivities or have whittled themselves down to an extremely restrictive diet because of said food sensitivities or reactions. And they always have leaky gut. Sometimes they'll have a high secretory IgA, which is the immune cells that are in your
Mm.
mucous membranes. And it's like they don't find it on some of these stool tests, but then you'll see the secretory IgA kicked up. So it's like their
Mm.
body's making an army to something that it's seeing, but the test isn't catching it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And so that's just some of the symptoms that I'll see people with parasites have. They're very specific, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And what are the most common parasites that people can have?
Well, 30% are microscopic,
Mm-hmm.
things like amoebas, giardia. We
Mm-hmm.
hear about that. Was a typical board question for us. A camper hikers out and drinks creek water and then gets,
Mm-hmm.
stomach issues, and that's always giardia. And blastocystis hominis is another one. It can even interfere with thyroid function a lot. Strongyloides is one that's really bad. I had a mentor that actually had that. Sore, fatigued muscles, just extreme fatigue and brain fog, digestive issues as well. And you have to remember parasites just don't stay in the gut. Oftentimes, depending on what kind you have, they move throughout the body, the liver, the bile ducts, other
Mm-hmm.
places. So people have systemic symptoms from this and histamine release as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then people can often have, helminths, worms, things like that. We do see that as well. We see it in a lot of children, pinworms, which are extremely contagious. The whole house will often get it at that point. So there's a lot of different things that present. And that's why we ask a myriad of different questions to try and catch which type of parasite you might be suffering from. I mean, if people have Lyme disease, we see co-infections with Babesia, which is
Mm-hmm.
confused as malaria on a blood smear. It's a microscopic parasite that gets inside red blood cells, and it causes night sweats and fatigue, and it's lots of different symptoms for people, shortness of breath. And so this is a parasite that runs with Lyme, right?
Yeah.
Microscopic, guys. So, and we see this very commonly with Lyme.
Wow. And then is the depending on the parasite you have, is the treatment going to be different or the same for anyone with parasites, or how do you go about the treatment protocols?
For sure. So it really, if we can locate it, sometimes I'll know
Mm-hmm.
people have parasites and I can't always catch it. Or, sometimes they don't have the money to afford the test I need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you still have to kind of treat as is. So I try and do everything holistically. I try and do everything with herbs if I can. I don't mind a good fenbendazole ivermectin protocol for some people, right? The studies are now showing the benefits,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But normally I do things like mimosa pudica seed, which is a really sticky seed from India that kind of swells up like a kid's sponge in the bath and it grabs everything. It's known as
Oh,
the gut scrubber. And that helps with yeast, bacteria, and parasites. I use a lot of things like wormwood, cloves, black walnut hull, pau d'arco, uva ursi, and things that really can go deep and penetrate in the cell like artemisian or wormwood.
right.
Um, and I try and cover my bases and switch things up throughout the course of cleansing some people for 3 to 6 months sometimes. So I get
Wow.
all the different life cycles, right?
Yeah. And so interesting. I think, that I've seen many, not many, a few, not enough, very few protocols online that people can buy all the supplements and the items you talked about put together. Do you have anything put together like that, Dr. Jess, for parasites?
I do actually.
Uh,
So I have a platform, a do-it-yourself platform called Wellness Plus that
mm,
launched in 2020. And it's really showing people how to calm the nervous system, to then open your drainage pathways, and then finally do a detox safely without feeling like crap, right?
yeah.
And so people, we have that for mold, parasites, anything on there. And it's really just about emptying your toxin bucket and coming back to your old self, because people don't, they think they're just getting older. They don't realize how toxins are ubiquitous in the environment. And then if you're toxin overrun, you're going to attract a pathogen for cleanup because you are part of the ecosystem. And if they only
Right.
knew that the power was in their hands, I just think as
That's
doctors,
awesome.
yeah, we can do better. We can teach them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and what was the name of your platform again?
Wellness Plus. So it's
Wellness Plus.
wellnessplus.com. Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
wellnessplus.com.
Yes. You got it.
Great. And so if someone is experiencing these symptoms, they can come to your platform, get educated on it, and you have suggestions for treatment as well.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. We have a whole kind of hand-holding care program that's actually recently launched. So
I
yeah.
love it. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Can we talk a little bit about just let's talk about toxins in general, environmental toxins in general. One of the things that you talk a lot about is sauna, and you have a protocol there. And I'd love to dive into your explanation about environmental toxins and this protocol of yours.
Yes. So I mentioned that they are ubiquitous in the environment, and that's true. And my theory is a lot of people are sick because of things that are inside them that don't belong inside them.
Right.
We also have to make sure we're eating well and ingesting healthy water, all that kind of stuff, putting good things into us, antioxidants. But there are a lot of things like metals and plastics, microplastics, pesticides that can really wreak havoc on a system. And so if I think that, gosh, things are entering the system through absorbing through the skin, through breathing mold sores or whatever through the nose, or pesticides, eating things that we shouldn't be eating that cause inflammation, then, how do we get those things out? Even if I gave people a magic limitless pill that fixed everything in their body, guess what? That pill would still have to go through your body, be
Right.
processed and assimilated and released through your liver or your kidneys.
Yeah.
So if your liver and your kidneys aren't working, then the pill isn't going to work.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
then things enter the body. How do we get them out? We have to work with the body's innate detox pathways or drainage pathways. So if you aren't pooping, I can guarantee you have brain fog, my friend.
Hmm.
You aren't releasing, you poop to release toxins.
Right.
That's why so if you probably have an estrogen problem too, because you're not pooping out estrogen.
Hmm.
If you're not sweating, there's studies I can show you where you can sweat out heavy metals. You can
Hmm.
sweat out pesticides. You can sweat out flame retardants. And so if you're not sweating, you probably feel like you glisten, but it's not healthy because it serves to cool the body down. It also releases toxins that are ubiquitous every day that you're breathing and absorbing through the body. The liver is one of the biggest filters in the body. And in America, it's usually the problem child.
Yeah.
So, usually people need a little bit of TLC in the liver. And I hate it when doctors say, well, you have a liver and kidneys, you don't need to detox. What is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
Right.
That is a stagnant liver.
Yeah. It's a massive problem right now too. Is that, I think 80% plus of people have metabolic syndrome. And one of the problems there is a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it's crazy because, when I trained 30 years ago, we saw liver failure and we did liver transplants on people. It was mostly due to hepatitis and alcohol. We
Mm,
never saw non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And now it's
man,
the number one cause of liver transplantation
isn't that
is
sad?
people that don't drink that get fatty liver from toxin buildup, and metabolic health abnormalities.
That's so sad, actually. We used to never see it. I kind of remember the beginning of my career when it was first coming out. We were like, "Wow, what's this?" It was
Right.
rare to see. It's sad now because it's linked to things like high fructose corn syrup and mercury, and things that are completely unavoidable for people if they're educated.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
really get tired of the rhetoric about, well, you don't need detox, you have detox organs. Like the body's just a machine that can't get overwhelmed, or there can't be traffic jams, or minerals or metals are replacing minerals or whatnot in the
Right.
body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's such a good way to explain it. So what's the kill and bind portion of the kill, bind, sweat? Sweat is sauna.
Yeah, exactly. And that went viral without me expecting that online. It kind of sounds like I'm an S&M doctor or something here,
Yes.
but so kill means this is after everybody's drainage is open, right? So when everybody's drainage, you're pooping, you're sweating, your liver, your bile are going, you're sleeping better. Okay, time for the detox. So kill, bind, sweat is a great kind of practical, generalized detox that the majority of people can understand and do and afford. So, kill is we use herbal antimicrobials. I really like a few different companies, but I look for things like the herbs I mentioned to you earlier for people. And I usually look for broad coverage. So sometimes that includes one or two kill products. And then I have people wait about 30 minutes to an hour and take a binder. Now, this is after I've already replaced their mineral stores. So they're remineralized. I'm not stripping minerals with bentonite and zeolite clay. I'm often using fulvic and humic acid binders. And then finally, you put them on a sauna. You can take
Mm,
a binder before the sauna, a binder after. And what the body does is say, oh, we're pulling things up and out of the fascial and lymph tissues. We're mopping things up, right? Toxins up, but then we're sweating them out. So you start to sweat sooner in a sauna with a binder. The body is very intelligent, right?
mm,
So I can do this 3 or 4 times a week with people, not, so we don't want to demineralize them too much with sweating and binding. But if you're in mold, this is a great way to release mold spores. This is a great way to release environmental toxins or other pathogens because they can't stand the heat a lot of the
yeah.
times. right?
So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people that are suffering with these type of problems, then they can also probably learn about this protocol on your website, and they can get some of these items to take before and after sauna, right? Is that kind of how you're putting it
Yeah.
together for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are some people who tell me, I never sweat or I feel awful. What do I do?
Yeah.
Start slow, like start 5 minutes in a sauna and tack a minute on each week. Or, get in a hot bath, go outside and walk. Any way you can just sweat. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sauna. So don't paint yourself in that one box.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
We have a few more minutes. I'd love to touch on
Yes.
mold. I also use that Vibrant total toxin test, and I find so many people have mold, different aflatoxins, other toxins from mold. And there's a certain percentage of people that are out there shouting from the rooftops that mold is not a problem. We've
Mm,
been evolved to live with mold as humans.
yeah.
And I just would love for you to kind of talk about that in the last few minutes we have, and how you think about mold.
I think they're right and we're right. And let me
Yeah.
explain the nuance here. So you're right. Mold has evolved with us. I mean, parasites are as old as we are. How can they be the problem? The problem is our modern living.
Mm,
And we're building houses that are energy efficient, which is great for energy efficiency, but it's horrible for mold growth and lack of airflow, which is not how nature intended. In fact, nature keeps mold in check by airflow.
mm,
Then we're using toxic building materials in the paints, in the adhesives, in the particle boards. And we build the houses outside, exposed to the environment where it rains on the wood halfway through building. So it's really the way that we are building the houses and the materials that we're choosing to build them with. And this is promoting the growth and stability of mycotoxins and mold, in my opinion.
yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I mean, the way we live right now in these homes that are erected with, like you said, in the outside. So right there, the wood gets rained on, it can get mold, and then we just put a house around it, and then we paint it with flame retardant chemicals and
Easy.
paint, and carpet it with, with the same chemicals on the carpet, and then outfit the furniture with all of these
Flame
chemicals on it.
retardants, spray
Right.
them, spray them. At least they
Yeah. And
won't catch
then
on fire when we smoke cigarettes on them, but they have flame retardants. It's okay.
exactly. And then we live in these homes and we keep the windows closed all the time, never opening them and not letting any of the outside air in, just recirculating all of that stuff. It's no wonder we're getting more sick, right?
Yes, it's no wonder. And so we spend 80% of our time indoors. And if you don't have quality, air quality that you want there, it's a problem. Or you live in a humid area, you live on the beach, or, where the ocean's extremely corrosive. These people are having to remediate almost every year.
Right.
Right. So we have to look at how we are living in society and how we are working against ourselves in nature.
Right. And what can someone do if they've found that they have these mold toxins in their urine test?
Yes. So I always like to, the one drawback with something like the vibrant urine test is that you can't tell if it's a past or current exposure.
Correct.
Right. And so I really like to have the person, if they can have the means to do so, get an environmental relative moldy index test or ERMI test, which is developed by the EPA. My favorite company it's a silly name, but EnviroBiomix. They have a number 8 test on there, which looks for gram-positive actinomycetes, which is also almost a bigger problem than mold, endotoxic gram-negative bacteria, which can grow in water damage as well, and the mold test, right? So it covers all 3 of our bases, and it helps me match up what I see on the Vibrant Total Tox test, the mold in the body, with the house. And that way I can say, okay, it's your current house, it's a previous house, and now we have to check and make sure the mold isn't colonized in your sinus cavities or your gut, because you can turn into a little mycotoxin making factory if we aren't careful, and to carry it with you after you leave the exposure.
Hmm.
Right. So I like to kind of match it up that way with people. And then if we find, oh, it's a previous exposure, it's a current exposure, sometimes I'll check a Marcon's nasal swab to see if they have
Mhm.
mold in their nose. Right. That's a good one
Right.
too. And then I often will open drainage, and then binders are very important for me too. Getting people out of the exposure is very important for me because avoidance is the number one rule of environmental medicine. And there are many people that won't get better until they're able to leave the exposure. It's the worst part of my job, actually.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I bet. Yes, the hardest
Yeah.
part is getting people to leave the exposure for sure.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What binders are you using for mold?
Yeah, so I really love fulvic and humic acid
Yeah.
binders. So I often use cell core binders. My company, Aegis Formulas, will be launching a binder in this fall.
Nice.
So we will also have a binder out that I'll be using too. Every now and then I'll do something like a zeolite or bentonite clay or an activated charcoal, but those are my least favorite. I think they strip more, they make people more constipated. And, we can't have people constipated during a mold detox. So,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. Wow. I wish we could talk for like another hour, Dr.
I-
Jess, but you're so full of incredible knowledge here. Thank you so much for giving us all these really actionable tips. And, I'm really excited you shared your website where people can learn more and
Yeah,
dive deeper into this.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. You're a great interviewer. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Jess. You just quickly tell people where they can find you on social media as well?
Sure. So I post a lot of free information on social media if that's your guys' jam. It's on Instagram, it's dr period JESS period MD. And then there's W Plus by Dr. Jess, which is my Wellness Plus Instagram account where we also post a lot of free information. I have drjessmd.com, my regular website, wellnessplus.com, and then my supplement company, which is aegisformulas.com. So
Perfect. Dr. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you for having me.